I'm Cynthia Rothschild, and I'm an independent activist and a consultant. I'm based in the U.S., in New York, and I've been doing work at the Human Rights Council for more years than I ought to be admitting, really since its inception, actually. So one of the things that I've been watching here and in other UN spaces really is the links across different kinds of fundamentalisms. So we talk a lot about religious fundamentalism. We talk a lot about economic fundamentalism. Um, there's a rigidity across all of these political and economic and religious systems. So I don't think we can talk about any one independent of the others. What we're seeing within the UN, particularly in terms of religious fundamentalism, is not, first of all, it's not grounded in any one particular ideology. It's not just Christian, it's not just Muslim. I'm talking about, Jewish fundamentalism and Hindu fundamentalism and, the fact also that the Vatican functions as a state within the UN system. So there's a very particular kind of Christian fundamentalist ideology that plays out here within the United Nations. But I'm talking about all of these things together. But I think what's happening is that we're looking at an attack on the human rights system, and all of these fundamentalisms are coming together to try to weaken the fabric of multilateralism, and that's happening in large part at the expense of marginalized groups of people. It's happening at the expense of women, and it's happening through tactics that are often about gender and sexuality. As someone living in the United States right now, it's pretty hard to talk about any of these situations without, first of all, without cursing. It's a very difficult time, and within the context of the United States, I think we're looking at an intersectionality of hatred. We're looking at an intersectionality of oppressive ways of thinking. So we're looking at an intersectionality of misogyny and anti-immigrant sentiment and intense racism and white supremacy. We're looking, if you go further, then you're looking at racism that is often anti-Black in particular. You're looking at anti-immigration. You're looking at anti-migrants. Certainly in terms of what's happening at U.S. borders now, there's an anti-Latino. It's more than a sentiment. I was going to say sentiment. It's so much more than that. It's policy and practice. And it cuts across the systems, right? So part of the danger that we see right now is that there's a tightly woven tapestry across the departments, within the State Department, within UN policy. Trump is off on his own. I don't even know what. I don't know if it's a plan or if it just comes out of his mouth every day. But as much as I want to position this as a problem within Trump as an individual, it's actually much broader than that. We see strategies here at the UN that they're the strategies from people like Steve Bannon. They're the strategies from people like John Bolton. Nikki Haley, who's the U.S. UN ambassador, has only been doing this kind of foreign policy work for a very brief period of time, and she is echoing and carrying these pretty brutal anti-multilateral and anti-human rights messages. It's not just Trump; it's across the board, and it's across the systems. And I want to say I think it's really important to look at the anti-human rights sentiment, but see the corporate sentiment that undercuts all of this as well. I can say more about that. When I say that the corporate, it's a follow the money argument. So right now, for instance, if we're looking at what's happening with kids taken from their families at the southern border of the U.S. in Texas, let me say a few things about this. First of all, if you look at the contracts that the Department of Health and Human Services and other departments in the U.S., there's so much federal money that's moving into contracts that are built around detaining people, and in this case, detaining children and relocating. It sounds so generous and it sounds gentle. These kids are being ripped from their families, so they're being kidnapped. I don't think that's a wrong word. They're being kidnapped. They're being held hostage. They're being internally displaced. I mean, all of this to say that if these kids in particular are being moved, and if contracts are being awarded that will allow for the detention of the children and of the adults, there's a lot of money in this. There's a longer-term strategy. This isn't something that just developed 2 weeks ago. And I think we have to look very seriously at this question of who's profiting from this and who's making decisions